Welcome to Event Stars. This is a podcast about events and people from around the world that we consider to be stars responsible for organising some of the world's most magical experiences, whether it be in festivals, nightlife or conferences and much more. Now, if you're involved in the world of events or would like to get into events, or if you just have a curiosity for the people behind events or would like to know how events are organised, then this is definitely the podcast for you. If you've got any feedback on anything that you hear or would like to recommend anyone that you think should be on this podcast, then please drop me a message on Instagram at events_Gurmej or on Twitter, which is GurmejSP, spelled GURMEJSP. But for now, enjoy and happy listening. Hello and welcome to Event Stars. In this episode, I interview Paul Bassi, CBE. Now, Paul is a leading businessman and philanthropist who has interests in a £300 million plus property and business portfolio, which includes estate agencies, investment properties, development land, hospitality, finance and care homes, all employing hundreds of staff. He's the CEO of the Birmingham-based AIM-listed property investment company, Real Estate Investors PLC, chairman of Bond Wolf, which he co-founded in 1983, and non-executive chairman of Likewise PLC. Paul served as the president of the Birmingham Chamber of Commerce and was formerly regional chairman to Coutts Bank West Midlands, and is former director of the Birmingham Hippodrome. He was appointed High Sheriff for the County of the West Midlands in 2009 and has received honorary doctorates from both Birmingham City and Aston University. In 2010, he was awarded a CBE in the New Year's Honours List in recognition of his services to business and the community in the West Midlands. And Paul continues to support the community via the Bond Wolf Charitable Trust, with the primary focus being to raise funds for worthy causes, regardless of age, sex or background. In 2017, he founded the Sandwell Valley School, providing education and training programs for vulnerable young people. Now, the school has proved an enormous success with over 110 children ranging from year 8 through to 6th form. Paul has recently published a book, Brick by Brick, Success in Business and Life, with all profits going back to the Bond Wolf Charitable Trust. Now, although Paul isn't directly in the events industry, he does own a very well-known fine dining restaurant called Usher's, and with that in mind, we discussed topics around the events and hospitality industry. But given his plethora of knowledge and experience in business and life, we also spoke about a variety of other topics, including his book, Success, his drive to be number one, driving teams, his recommended reading list, and the importance of health and well-being. So here it is, my interview with Paul Bassi. Enjoy. Paul, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time to be on Event Stars. You're not in the events business per se, but you have owned restaurants and you own a restaurant in Usher's. But having read a lot about you and understood some of the things that you've done in your life, it was hard to know where to begin with this chat today. But let's start with the book. Why did you write Brick by Brick?
I've been asked to do a book a few times, and to start with, you're a little bit uncomfortable with the prospect of being asked to write a book because you don't feel you've got anything to offer. So that happened in my 30s, 40s. I'm now in my late 50s, and I thought, well, why not? So one was to kind of record the journey where the business had gone on and both what my family had gone on, which was very similar to a lot of families, whether they be Sikh or immigrants otherwise. Secondly was just to sort of share what we'd learned with others. And finally, it was a great way to raise some money for charity. So collectively, it all kind of seemed okay.
Okay. And what were the steps that you took to write the book? Because a lot of people talk about, I want to write a book, but it's not just, you sit down and write. You must have to plan the thought process and how you're going to get your thoughts across.
So I believe that when you do anything, whether you're in an event business, a career, it doesn't have to be to do with money, it can be medicine or anything, you've got to stick to a few principles. One is, what's your big picture? So my big picture was that I wanted a first-class product. I wanted it in every major bookshop. I wanted it in the UK. I wanted it in India. I wanted it in North America, etc. So that was my big picture. I then always say, well, you've got to surround yourself with great people. So I needed to go and find a great publisher. And I took some advice from people who are very experienced. So I wrote off to a few publishers. I was told I wouldn't hear from them for a while, but actually within a few weeks we had 3 book offers. I went with Bloomsbury, so again surrounded myself with good people. Bloomsbury, the publisher to Harry Potter. I got myself a ghostwriter, and sort of 4 or 5 hours at a time, once or twice a week over a 6-month period, we'd have conversations. He'd write the book, I'd read it, we'd tweak it, we'd change it, but in the end we got to where we wanted to get to. And those ingredients apply about having a big picture, surrounding yourself with good people, whether you're writing a book or whether you're running a business. So that's all I did. I mirrored what I did with everything else.
I saw the reading list that you've got at the end of your book, which I take it is a recommended reading list for people who want to get into business or be successful. I mean, there's some fantastic books on there. I mean, How to Win Friends and Influence People, an all-time great, and something that's still true today. And then you've put a lot of Jim Collins on there. When you were writing your book, there were some references in there, for example, fire torpedoes rather than bullets, and I've read that somewhere in Jim Collins about bullets and cannonballs. How much influence have the likes of Jim Collins and Martin Gladwell and those authors had on your writing and your thinking in business?
So over the years, people say to me, well, how comes you did what you did? Well, first of all, I find that quite uncomfortable, because you never think of yourself as a success. One of my favourite sayings is that no man is a success unto himself. Well, I'm no different to that. But if I try and answer that question, because I understand it's well intended, reading books is really where I got the edge on people. I didn't have anybody within the business to go to. I didn't have an older brother that had walked this journey. I didn't have generations of family that had run public companies, etc. I just started reading. I found it very real, very genuine. It meant that I wasn't doing anything else. I was completely focused. So I suspect all of those books have influenced me to varying degrees, and I practice a lot of what's in those books, particularly Jim Collins, who wrote Good to Great, How the Mighty Fall, Built to Last, and probably one of their best books was the last one, which was Great by Choice. And I learned lots of lessons from them. I've understood mistakes I've made from there. There's been times when I should have fired a torpedo and I only fired a bullet, but I don't make those mistakes anymore.
But at the same time, I think it's important, especially for entrepreneurs who are just getting into business, to sometimes understand the concept of firing bullets before the cannonball or the torpedo, because a lot of people get into business and I think they get excited by the project, or it might be a vanity project, but before even testing the market. Could you explain what that sort of meant, the whole bullets and torpedoes, before, just in case people haven't read your book or Jim Collins?
So when you're in business, you have lots of different projects, and some projects are obviously better than others, and of course you should research them, trial them, etc. When you come across the right ones and all the stars are aligned, you have to understand that one has greater potential, so you can't give it the resource you've given all the other projects that weren't of such potential. So you have to be brave and fire a torpedo, throw a good percentage of your resource at it, because it's the one that can multiply by 10, 20, 50, as opposed to the other projects which might have been multiples of 2, 3 and 4.
And what would you say on that list is your book that you gift the most, or would say is the most recommended that you would?
It depends on what stage of your life you're at. I think as a young man, Think and Grow Rich, I mean, the title I always think is a bit disappointing, because it's not about being financially rich. There's a lot more to that book there. I think the series of books by Jim Collins you've referred to are very good. I'm reading a book at the moment about stillness, which wasn't on that list. That book's appropriate to me today, age 58, but I wouldn't have understood it if I'd read that when I was 25.
What's it called?
It's something still.
Okay.
I forget the title. I should know the title. I've read it about 10 times.
Yeah.
I just think of it as it's quite a philosophical book about Buddhism, Sikhism, but it translates it all into business and sort of gives you a good philosophy on getting a bit of peace of mind.
I think it's really important that you've mentioned and you've listed those books, because one of the things you said was that gave you that edge. Now, there's a great saying that you should surround yourself with better people, like you always say, and also it pays not to be the smartest person in the room.
Yeah.
And sometimes you might not have those inspirational people around you, but those books and the like podcasts and things, and just listening to those people can give you that little bit of a inspiration and an edge, and help you sort of surround yourself with the people who aren't as smart as.
Yeah. Listen, knowledge is key, absolutely. Whether you go through a podcast, a video, you can watch a movie and be inspired, or you can watch Rocky and be inspired. You with me? So getting knowledge is all important here. I can only speak for myself. I absolutely know that had I not started reading so extensively, which then turned me into being open to understanding and meeting and learning, I would probably have been one of many. Whereas, I've been fortunate enough to have done quite well. Again, it's relative, but the books and the knowledge certainly were key for me.
You mentioned a lot in your book that success is relative. To you, what is success?
When you're a young man, success is a business, it's money, it's cars, it's material things. I get that. Actually, the truth is, once you've got all of those, and I suppose it's easy for me to say this, but actually they're of little value really. How many cars, how many houses you've got, how much money you've got in the bank. A real success, I guess, is being happy. What I enjoy the most actually is passing some of what I've learned on, watching the next generation fulfill their potential. Stuff really isn't important. Cars, houses, money, companies, valuations. I have no interest in them. In fact, I don't know anyone who's truly successful that ever did. There were other reasons why they succeeded. Those things just come along.
30 years ago, your first real estate deal, you put up a sold sign when the property wasn't really sold.
Yeah.
Do you want to just give us a bit of a short synopsis of that story?
Yeah. I mean, I hadn't realised what I'd done till I wrote the book, and I wouldn't have the creativity, let's put it like that, to do that today, because I wouldn't. I put a house up for sale because the local agents told me it was only worth, say, £20,000 odd, and I thought it was worth more. I put a board up. I got no phone calls. I got phone calls. People were not happy with the price I wanted to charge, and I thought, well, do I now sell it for the price the local estate agents do, or what? And I don't know what made me do it. I'll never know. I stuck a sold sign on it, and of course everyone then rang me up and said, can you sell our house for us? I think it was probably my pride, my sort of Sikh upbringing. I've always been proud. I couldn't be wrong. I couldn't get it wrong, and so I stuck a sold sign on it. Everyone else thought I'd sold it for that much, and they gave me their houses to sell. But the point is, I did sell their houses for a lot more. Actually, most people, it's in a small area called Sandal Valley, probably owe the house price growth in that area to me back in the late 80s.
I think one of the quotes that you put in your book is, don't be the man who talks about the man, be the man that the man talks about. And doing things differently, I think, makes you the man that people talk about. And that was one of the things that you did then. So you're saying that you wouldn't do something like that now, but the people I've read about who are successful, they do things differently.
Yeah. The only reason why I say I wouldn't do that today is I'm technically competent with all the rules and regulations, and I shouldn't have done that back then. But I didn't have anything to lose, so you do what you do. Today, I'd get my wrist slapped, people would be complaining, so no, I wouldn't do it today, and I wouldn't encourage anyone to do it today. But you've got to have that little bit oomph about you, which I must have had when I was 22, 23. And being different isn't what it's about. It's about being you. And if you're different, so be it. Don't let anybody else put you into a box you don't belong. You've got to dance to your own drum beat.
So describe over the years some of the traditional rules of business that you've ignored.
I've never followed the crowd. When somebody gives me technical appraisal, everyone says we should all be buying buy-to-lets, we should all be into refugee homes. I mean, right now, the house rule in the real estate world is not to buy retail, because all the shops are going to be empty, everyone's on the internet. I don't believe that for 1 second. The second most active event on a Saturday is going shopping after watching football. People won't stop shopping. It's what they do when they get to the high street. So the high street will turn into an experience: coffee, lunch, breakfast, bowling, cinema, lots of new things we don't even know about. I think presently that real estate's very cheap. So I've never followed the crowd. That's the key rule that I've not observed. And the other thing is, I don't like these formulas that say what you should buy and shouldn't buy. I don't like formulas about how much debt you should have and shouldn't have. So I use my instinct, and I don't like lots of debt. I like sensible debt.
You talk about instincts, but what gives you that insight, do you think? Because instinct is something I think you maybe develop over many years of doing things right, but there must have been some sort of analysis that you've done to come to these conclusions.
First of all, I mean, instinct to me is more valuable than intelligence. And one of my little pet whinges at the moment, we seem to be creating a lot of middle class intelligent people that can win every argument in the world about Brexit and politics and housing trends, but they've got no instinct. They don't know how to make a decision. But they can argue about everything without making a decision. So I think we should be aware that instinct is very valuable. My instinct came from the need to do well. I needed a roof over my head. I didn't want to be a working class kid that had to worry about a roof over his head, feeding my family, etc. I wanted security. So that the need was security. The instinct, I don't know whether it's been bred, whether it's in my DNA, but certainly the reading of the books brought it out of me. Meeting other people, reading lots of autobiographies. So instinct's very important, and it should be fed. And I think reading books and having knowledge feeds your instinct.
Describe how your background, whether it be Sikh, working class, a family of immigrants, has contributed to your success.
I'm like a lot of people here in the Midlands in the UK, came from immigrant families in Punjab. They landed here for employment reasons, working in factories and foundries. I'm Sikh, as you mentioned, and it's only when I did the book I realised actually that I'd been running my business on those principles. I'd never put the two together before. I understood from a very young age, you worked hard, you were honest, you were fair, you were decent, and that's all I've really done. That's about as complicated as my business model is. We look after the staff, we look after our shareholders, and we look after the community that allows us to be a successful business. Well, those are all good Sikh principles that we've adopted.
And your family, and I know you're very close to your grandmother, weren't you? Mm-hmm. I mean, what about the values that they kind of gave you and instilled in you as well?
They never lectured, they just did. They weren't talking a good talk. They all worked hard. We ran corner shops. My gran was a devout Sikh. I'd pick her up every morning, drop her off at the temple, take her home every night, go home, get changed into a dinner suit and go out to a dinner event. And she would always talk about being a good Sikh, about working hard, not deceiving anybody. And it was as simple as that. There was no regular lecturing. It was just, look, follow these principles and they'll be good for you.
When I came to see you at the dinner that you had here a couple of months ago, I asked you about coming on the podcast, and I said, I know you're very busy. And you turned around and you said to me, I'm not that busy. And I liked that, and it was something that stuck with me, because I've read somewhere, I think a designer lady, Debbie Milligan, she wrote that busy is a myth, that sometimes in life people like to have and wear this badge to say they're busy as some kind of success mantra. What would you say about the whole kind of busyness culture in modern day society?
Do you know, the most successful people I know have got the most responsibility, but if I pick the phone up to speak to them now, they can make themselves available. Busy's not good. Busy means you're not organised, it means you're not well resourced, you're not surrounded with good people. Being busy is not effective. Being smart, being clever, being responsible, being strategic, now that goes on in my head 24/7. I wake up and there'll be a thought there, you go to bed, you can't turn that off, which is why this book I'm reading about stillness is to be in the moment a bit more. I am not a busy man. My diary is totally mine. I can have any appointment where I want, when I want. Yes, there are some periods during which we've got to go on a road show, so we've got to adapt to that. If somebody tells me they're too busy, that worries me. That worries me. That being busy is not being efficient.
And what about from a health perspective, in terms of, you can run successful businesses, but it all comes down to one thing: are you still fit and healthy? How much impact has health had on your thinking about business in the long term now?
When you're a young man, again, and I keep talking about this, you don't think about health. I would be, I've never really been a drinker or anything like that. I've certainly not entertained drugs. It's just not been my bag. My thing would be to go to the gym and stay fit.
Yep.
But by the same token, I'd be out clubbing most nights of the week, doing everything a young man does at that stage in your life, fast cars and all of that sort of thing. But then it does catch up with you. And I think what caught up with me wasn't the physical pace of the life I was leading, was that over the years you take on stress and more responsibility and it builds up. So in my mid-40s, I had 2 blocked arteries, ended up having heart surgery, and there's no reason, there's no DNA that suggests I should have had that. My lifestyle and my diet doesn't suggest I should have that. But I do believe that what I had is pent up stress that built up and built up and built up. And in my mid-40s, when I was 45, that caught me out. So I had 2 stents, but all that's done is encouraged me to be fitter and healthier. It's a fantastic warning sign for me.
So what advice would you give to younger, stressed out people? How would you say they should approach being in business or success?
Being stressed out isn't what I was. Being stressed out is not good. What I did was I took too much responsibility on, because working at peak performance requires you to rest, and I really didn't rest. I was at peak performance 24/7 for about 20 years, and I paid the price. So being stressed out means you're doing something wrong. Working at peak performance for too long is when your health will suffer. So I think having holidays, having time out, going on big long walks, smelling the roses, this is stuff you've got to do if you want a long-term career, but more importantly if you want a healthy lifestyle.
And what about balancing that with family life, like your work, family life? Because I have a business and I go home and it's go with 2 young kids. Then finding that time to rest and recuperate, sometimes that is obviously enjoyable and a stress relief, but how would you say a good way to balance that would be?
Look, whenever you think you've got the balance right, something else will move, so therefore you've got to readjust the balance. So balancing is an ongoing thing. You'll never get that right, and what you do with your children when they're young, you won't need to do when they're a bit older. But I have always spent as much time with my children as I can. I doubt if I've ever missed a school sports event, a football match, a rugby match. I make sure I'm in the country when they get their exam results. I'll make sure I go to parents' evening. Those are things you've got to make time for, and I've no problem making time for those. However busy you are, again, you can make time for those. But the balance is an ongoing struggle. Don't think that anyone's got the balance right. I know millionaires and billionaires who can't get the balance right because something is changing all the time. It's like the weather. You've got to adjust to the weather every day. You can't permanently wear a duffel coat. You can't permanently go out in a t-shirt. So you've got to keep getting the balance right.
Competitiveness, you've always had that in you. You were a keen footballer when you were young. To what extent do you believe that the crossover with sport or any kind of hobby is there when it comes to being successful in business as well?
Well, the facts are that if you look at highly successful people, they are most likely to have been good sportsmen, because sports brings with it lots of disciplines, exercise, training, diet, knowledge. Well, all of those things are relevant to business. It brings with it a drive to win and succeed. And winning, to me, being number one, again reflecting back subconsciously, was very important. As a young kid, if I ran the egg and spoon race, I had to win. If I then played football, I needed medals because that proved that I'd done well at something. Making money was a trophy, really. As I've gotten older, I've realised that doesn't matter so much to me, but certainly as part of the journey you need to do that. So winning and doing well, being rich, having trophies, getting awards, some people sort of brush all that aside and to me take the easy way out. Again, they intellectualize about why none of that's important. And the truth is, once you've done it, you can arrive at the decision that it's not important to you. To tell me that it doesn't matter about being number one, it doesn't matter about being commercially successful, and that God will provide. Get off your backside, prove you can be number one, prove you can make the money, prove you can achieve, prove you can get promoted, and then you can say to me, well, actually, I've done it now and it's not for me. It's too easy just to say it's not for me because it's not that important.
But at the same time, I understand what you're saying, but there can only be one number one. And it wouldn't be, in my opinion, worth getting to that number one if it was at the detriment of your family and your health and things like that. So while I appreciate, there's a lot of people who do want to go into business and become number one, I think the whole thing about wellness and just keeping yourself fit and active so you can have that long life and fulfilled life is also very important.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. My drive was to be number one. If I had a number plate, it had to be a number. I didn't want to buy some crazy adopted number. It had to be, that's how I was wired.
Yeah.
But we come back to balance. It's about balance. I got the balance wrong and I paid the price for it. And it's good to be driven. It's good to be number one for those that want to, but being number one isn't successful. Being successful is fulfilling your potential. So if your potential was just to get on the rostrum, fulfill it. If your potential was to be number one, then you have a duty to fulfill that.
We'll go on to how you got into the restaurant business, but one of the things you've said is that you have a lot of opportunities that come your way from people, and you've said people present you with ideas and sometimes you can smell the bullshit in the room. Mm-hmm. What makes it, first of all, how would somebody get something in front of you that would make you think, all right, okay, this is worthwhile listening to?
Do you know, half the time people don't have the confidence to come and pitch to us. When we're all a bit younger, you remember the girl in the nightclub that was beautiful and nobody would go up and talk to her, and she'd complain that she didn't have a boyfriend. Well, actually, we're in that strange sort of space. But to answer your question, mostly it's the person. The idea and all the rest of it, has got to be right. But it's the person that you back. It's the person that you decide to follow. It's the team that you decide to back. That you mentioned the restaurants. I just went there for a meal. I didn't even know it existed. I went there a couple of times because I thought the food was really good. I'd heard who the owners were, and I knew they were in trouble. It was a listed vehicle, and I just rang them up and said, if you're thinking of selling these, knowing they were desperate for capital, this was back in a financial crisis, I made them a very modest offer, way below what it was worth, but the money would be there tomorrow, and they needed money, was important to them. So we did that deal. We trebled the turnover. And again, going back to being number one, I didn't want to be another restaurant. We're the only restaurant in the UK that's won British Curry Restaurant of the Year 3 times on the trot. We've won every award going. And that's what I mean by being number one. It's fulfilling its potential, and that's what that restaurant business is doing.
So let's wind this back about a bit. This is when you're talking about Asher's restaurant.
Yeah.
And it was open before you invested in it.
Yeah.
And you went there for a meal, and then you decided that because you liked the food and the atmosphere and the product, that it was a good opportunity to invest.
But I also spotted the guys that were working there. They were absolutely first class, and 10 years later they're still working for me, and we've shared the cake when we've opened other restaurants. We've given them some equity in the restaurant, so I could see the big picture with these restaurants. I could see that we had a really good management team there, so we surrounded ourselves with good people, and we share the cake with them, and it's been a success story.
It sounds really easy from the outset. I know it's not. So what were the steps you took to evaluate whether a restaurant would be a good business decision? Because again, I think a lot of people think about restaurants as a vanity project, something that they're passionate about, something that they love doing. And there's nothing wrong with the passion project, but someone like yourself who's been very astute in business would have taken some steps to evaluate the business model.
When you say it, nothing's easy, actually the really successful businesses are really easy. My evaluation of that was that somebody else had spent £2 million fitting out a restaurant. Somebody else had spent 2.5-3 years getting it to where it had got to. So all the startup pain had now gone. It didn't require any capex particularly. What it lacked was understanding the local market. This was owned by a London-based listed company with a franchise from a master franchisor in Dubai. They didn't get the Birmingham market. I believe they understood the Birmingham market. It wasn't a case of, stack it high, $3.99 for a curry. I felt there was an opportunity there to go upscale with it. And we're about celebrity awards. So, the basics were there. There was no capex risk. And I felt we could allow it to fulfill its potential. And that's exactly what we did.
And then you've got the restaurant, you bought it, and again in your book you mentioned a lot about there are a lot of £10 buffets around, and you didn't want to be that.
Yeah.
You wanted to be completely at the other end of the market.
Yeah.
How did you put the infrastructure in place to ensure that it was going to be successful and run how you wanted it to be run?
Yeah, the restaurants, it's funny that whenever I get into it, everyone talks about the restaurant. It's our smallest business, but the principles are exactly the same. The infrastructure, the strategy and the drive is our responsibility. And back to your Jim Collins book, I got all the right people on the bus, I put them all in the right seats. And then, the marketplace that I understood isn't Poundland. We don't stack them high, we don't do buffets. When I was in banking, I chaired the Coots business. Our auction business, we're the number one in the Midlands. Again, this number one thing that I realised I was addicted to didn't come to me until I actually was writing the book. So the restaurant needed to be number one. It needed to be high end. When I was in banking, we were high end. When we were in auctions, we're high end. It's my space. I get that space. I don't get Poundland, and I tend to stay away from that. It's for others who do very well with it, but I identify those opportunities quite quickly.
And you want it to be a high-end brand, but when you first took over, it was around the financial crisis. It's a big restaurant, Asher's.
Mm-hmm.
How did you market it, or how did you get your team to market it so it would make money, because that's what it's all about at the end of the day.
Look, it's a 200-seater restaurant. Somebody else had spent £2 million fitting it out. What I now need to do is get that to the customers. So we invested a lot of money in social media. We got our black book out. We got our network out. We put it forward for a few awards. We won a few awards. We got a couple of celebrities in there. And I sold the dream. I sold the dream in Birmingham of going for the best curry house, to have dinner with footballers, celebrities and businessmen in an award-winning restaurant, and the food is first class. It wasn't hard because, again, the people were good in there. The restaurant, the chefs, the staff are magnificent. So it wasn't hard for me. It just needed a bit of direction from me.
How did you get the celebrities in there? Was it PR companies?
No, we cook good food.
Is that the real story behind it?
No. I promise you. We have the Hippodrome. Simon Cowell orders his curry when he comes there. All the Hippodrome people come there. The footballers like a curry. They'd heard it was a good restaurant, and they came along. And the rest is history.
You've talked about your team a lot. What steps do you take to choose your teams?
Well, first of all, I have very good partners. So the restaurant, and they say you should be very careful picking your partners, not just in business, in life. Your mates, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your husband, your wife. These are big key decisions.
Definitely.
Get those wrong, and it's hard to recover. So my partner in the restaurant is a lad called Bovan. I've known him for 35 years of my life. We play racquetball. We've been on holiday. We've grown up. His skill set's very different to mine. He's a manager of an asset. He's a very good financial manager. He lives and breathes day-to-day business. So he fitted in terms of managing it for me, because that's not my skill set. And then below that, we had people that were trained in Dubai and India, worked in top restaurants, and I felt they would make a really good team for us. So what I really did was create a reputation for the restaurant, had a very good partner and manager financially in it, and then we had operational people that were second to none in Birmingham, and you put all of that together, it's not difficult. But that formula is in our auction business. That's run by my nephew and his team. They've got over 100 years of experience, so we've surrounded ourselves with an experienced team. Their market reputation and their service on the day is why they're one of the leading auction houses in the UK as well.
And I think it's important to recognise that there is a difference between management and leadership. Describe what that means to you, the difference between owning a business and managing a business.
Yeah, my job is to live in tomorrow. The people managing the business are in it today, this afternoon, tonight, with all the queries that come with that. They might have to deal with what's going on this month, next week, this season. My job is to be years ahead. I've got to make sure we're in a good place in the future, so that when we get there, we're already covered. So being a good leader is about strategy, and I think that's the key thing. And the other thing is you've got to roll your sleeves up and be prepared to do anything you're going to ask your staff to do, which I would always do.
And you mentioned in a few of your businesses you like to give your employees skin in the game. How do you know when it's the right time to offer that?
If you surround yourself with the right people, you've got to offer them. If it's a startup, you've got to offer them skin in the game straight away. But you tend to learn a lot about your very good people. Very rarely has anyone ever come to me for a pay rise. My job is to identify that, call them in and give them the pay rise, give them the shares, give them the bonus. And again, I think that's a key role for a leader.
What is good hospitality in your book?
I know you're focusing on hospitality. It doesn't matter whether you're in hospitality, whether you're in any other business. The old expression about, in America the customer is king, but in Japan he's God. I don't want to disrespect God, but you've got to treat your customer like you want to be treated yourself. And if you're selling him a Poundland product, you've got to give him the best of the Poundland product. If you're giving him a 5-star product, you've got to give him a 7-star product. So great service is what hospitality is all about. Price is the last thing anyone's worried about at the high end. People can wine and dine around the world for £1,000, £2,000 per sitting. There's no way the food's worth that. So there must be something that people are prepared to pay. Handbags, expensive cars, they don't really cost the differential that people are prepared to pay. So it's image, it's quality, it's service, and whether it's handbags or restaurants, it runs through.
I think this is something that I've noticed, especially in the hospitality or events business in the last couple of years, is that you mentioned about the high street earlier, that a lot of people now want to go to the high street for an experience. We're living in a world where I think, millennials especially are less interested in buying fancy cars, buying fancy watches. They want to have those experiences, and some of it might be vanity for Instagram and to show their friends where they are, but they do want to have those, and they will pay for something if it is good quality or perception's reality, perceived to be something the hottest place to be.
Nothing's changed, millennials or non-millennials. There's always been people that want to be seen, who want experiences. Quite often they want the experiences because just at that point in time they can't afford the watches and the cars. People will still want to get a badge, get a medal. That could be a car, that could be a house. It's a trophy. It's to say to themselves they've achieved. It's to give themselves a pat on the back. So millennials or not, nothing's changed. The difference is now you can tell the whole world about it, not just your mates.
What advice would you give to somebody? All right, we are focusing on events and hospitality, but just getting into a young graduate who wants to get into business, what would be the sort of maybe 3 or 4 pointers that you would give them?
We talked about reading. So reading. You can't read enough. I would say the number one thing is identify somebody who's been on that journey. And now you can do that through autobiographies, so you can't access everybody, but there will be somebody on your doorstep that you can access. Go and see them. I'm sure, like me, they'll find the time for you. And if you follow them, they'll continue to support you and encourage you. I guess when I've had a few people who have come for a bit of advice, it's a bit like going to the doctors with your symptoms. You kind of tell the doctor your symptoms, he gives you some medicine, you go back a week later and you're still feeling crap, and he says, well, did you take the medicine? And you say, well, not all of it. Well, when you have someone you're mentoring, they've got to take all the medicine, and when you're being mentored, you've got to take all the medicine. So I would say find a good mentor, read lots, and there's no replacement for hard work. That's a given. You've got to be up first, in bed last. So nothing. I'm not going to tell you anything you haven't heard before, but if you want to fast track things, go and find a mentor and read lots.
You're a bricks and mortar gentleman. Where do you see the whole property, hospitality, owning restaurants market when it comes to technology, and whether that could change things?
Well, it's already changing things. Technology in the food sector is making it more efficient. So, people are cooking less and less at home because they're having takeaways. On a personal note, I don't tend to buy takeaways because I don't think that's good for my diet, etc., etc. So technology is fast tracking all of that. We get Deliveroo, we get all these other sort of similar organisations. But I think what technology is also doing is improving the experience when you do go out. So we're about to have back at Asher's digital menus so that you can see your food live on a video on your tablet. You can tweak it. You can pick the wine that goes with it. So technology is wonderful. You can have good TV screens with all sorts of clever things going on there. How you book on your phone and all. It's made the restaurateur's life easier if they're open to change, but of course it requires investment.
And a lot of young people I mean, I hear it a lot that people say, "Oh, it was so much easier to be in business 30 years ago. You know, it was easier to buy property, it was cheaper, and it was easy to open a shop or a restaurant." What do you say back to that?
They were saying that 30 years ago. Nothing, I promise you, it's just, it's a cop-out. Yeah, it's as hard today as it was then. If I grab one of those kids who tells me how hard it was, and I give them my equivalence of that situation, they'll realise how easy they've got it today. It's not any harder. You've just got to find the opportunity. If you think it's too hard, you're not looking hard enough for the opportunity.
And at the same time, I remember when I started 10, 12 years ago, that the cost of websites have come down so much. You know, I can go and have my office in the middle of Colmore Road, just down the road from here in WeWork, and have a hot desk for 150 quid a month. I don't have to have a whole, you know, with the internet and you know, the address and everything like that. You can employ people from around the world at a touch of a button. And I think people have to recognise that there's so much opportunity that's come with the technology and the ability to remote work.
Do you know, if I had one wish, I'd love to be 21 today. But putting aside the obvious reasons why you want to be 21, because you're younger and all of that, my God, the world is full of opportunity. Your customer isn't the guy down your street, it's the whole effing world. As you say, you can set up for nothing. Now, you won't stay in WeWork forever, because as your business matures, you'll want your own front door, your own office, and your own brand and all of that, and you might want to become a WeWork one day. Although on a personal note, I'm not convinced about the WeWork model outside major cities like London, New York and Tokyo. I'm not sure WeWork works very well.
It is a great product though. You know, I've had a look inside.
For the customer it is, and I'm not so sure it's going to be a great product for the investor.
Even downstairs they were telling me, I think they're about 30% capacity at the moment, which is a long way to go until they they get their money back on that. You know, you've achieved a lot, and there's a great quote, I think it's Shakespeare: "The purpose of life is to find your gift to the world, and the meaning of life is to give it away." And when I look at what you've achieved and I see success, I also see what you have given back to society, the work you've done in the local community to give back. So what would you say the next 5-10 years looks like for you?
First of all, I don't think I've done a lot, honestly. I'm not trying to be really modest. I just get out of bed. I have to do everything everybody else does: shower, work out what I'm going to wear, you know, should I have a shave today or not, you know, all the same things that everyone else does. I had the resource, and my Sikh upbringing maybe influenced it, that doing stuff for your community, just, it feels good. If you've ever given anybody a present, you can't wait to give them a present. When you buy your kids toys at Christmas, you're more excited about seeing your child's face than the child will be bored with the toy in about 10 minutes, but it's meant a lot to you to find the money to go out, buy it, wrap it, etc. I've just been in that position. I'm able to give lots of gifts away, and it's not money always, it's time, it's strategy, it's support, it's giving people confidence. I'm in a fortunate place. I've done the material stuff, and I still enjoy making money, but that's not for me anymore, I suspect. I'm enjoying doing other things, you know, more educating, more reading, and I think we'll support lots of worthy causes because we enjoy doing it.
And you mentioned sort of the habits that you have the morning, when you get up in the morning. What is your morning routine like?
You know, not much different from anybody else's. Honestly, I probably should get out of bed a bit earlier. I used to, until I read a book by Ariana Huffington, who said that actually her illness came from not sleeping enough. So sometimes when I get up early at 6 o'clock in the morning, which is early for me, I'll lie in bed for an hour and just rest. Okay. But otherwise, you know, I get up, I don't run around like I used to. I'll drive to work when I know the traffic's died down. The most important thing to me is, you know, what's the weather like? And the reason I share that with you, when I grew up, people would say, well, nice day today. And I didn't know. I had no idea whether the sun was shining or whether it was snowing, because my mind was on work. And I was sitting in an office quite often without a window, and they'd say, "Oh, crap weather today," and I'd say, "Well, I don't know, I haven't looked, I haven't had time to look." Now the weather decides what car I'm going to drive, what I'm going to wear, which business I might go and visit. So, my morning's a very normal morning. I don't see people as often anymore. I'll only see people on a Wednesday and Thursday because I think it's important that I'm left alone beyond my desk just to push and prod and strategy and make connections. And as a result of that, I'm far more useful to the business doing that than I'm ever going to be working. And one of my phone calls can do more than the rest of the business could do in a year. Well, I should be left to make those phone calls.
It's a good mantra to have, again, as a leader rather than a manager, and I think it's something that a lot of young CEOs should probably look at and emulate as well. And just to finish off, a bit of a quick fire round. What is a new habit that you've picked up that has changed your life for the better?
I've stopped seeing people, not having appointments. I'm far more productive with having less appointments in my diary, and I have days when I don't see anybody, but other days I work the hardest.
What is something that you've changed your mind about in the last couple of years?
When I was younger, if I had a goal, and I think it was appropriate then but not now, if I had a goal, it would have to be done by that day, by that moment. There were no excuses. Now it doesn't matter to me if it happens a day after or a week later. It's not the end of the world. I'm just far more relaxed about goals than I used to be. But I can do that now that I've proved to myself, let alone anybody else, that I could do it. Now, I'm relaxed about it.
So nowadays, what do you do when you're unfocused or overwhelmed?
Yeah, I'm not. I don't understand that territory. I've never been overwhelmed by anything in my life other than the experiences with your children and family. I don't get that space at all. It doesn't happen to me.
Okay. Do you have a favourite failure or something that led to future success that you failed with?
I've had lots and lots and lots of failures or mistakes, if we call them that, but they're really not a mistake or a failure if you learn from them and don't make them again. I think if there was a mistake, I probably should have gone to London many years ago, maybe when I was in my early 30s, because London is a global warehouse of capital, and accessing capital in real estate allows you to grow. I should have probably have done that earlier, but for reasons that I'm very happy with, it meant more to me to watch my son and nephew play rugby every Saturday morning at King Edward's than it did earning an extra, whatever I earned back then. So, yeah, I think if I were a really ambitious young man, I should have gone to London. However, today, I mentioned my son and my nephew. They could go to London very easily. In fact, I do have one nephew in London. Birmingham is really the place to be. I think anyone who doesn't hear the mood music is going to miss a big trick here. Being in Birmingham will be fantastic for the next few decades.
I mean, this is what I was about to say. There's always that feeling when you go to London that, wow, I'm in a big city, big lights and all the rest of it, and that, it's a better place for business and opportunity. But yeah, there's so much going on here at the moment, and it just feels like a city that's
Do you know,
buzzing.
I've been going to London for nearly 40 years. In the last 10, it's changed. Before that, I'd go to London, I'd be wowed by the level of business, the quality of people, the cars, the lifestyle. Now you go to London, and remember, it's all about people. People there are a bit more lost. You go and see the funds and the institution, they're all negative. They're certainly not as positive as they used to be. And I go to London now and I often say to them that I come here and I feel depressed. And when I go back to Birmingham, I cheer up. So I think the world's changed. London has got a lot of challenges that we haven't got. Global challenges, UK challenges. Birmingham is all on the up, and I think you've got to jump on that train to enjoy the journey.
And you mentioned in what you were just saying about approaching people for capital and investment. Do you think how important do you think it is for people to get investment in their businesses, if at all?
Listen, if your idea is any good, if your product is any good, money is the easiest thing to get. I've never known a great idea not find money. It's never happened. And I've always said, they'd come along and say, such and such a building's for sale. My mantra has always been, find the deal and I'll find the money. And youngsters say, I can't get into property nowadays. It's so hard to find the money. Quantitative easing came along in the financial crisis on a global basis. The banks have got more money to lend than ever. Corporates have got bigger balance sheets than ever. Foreign institutions want to lend in the UK more than ever. There's more money around in the UK than in the history of money. So nobody should be telling me they can't find money to find it's the deal you've got to find in the business. That's got to be right.
What advice do you hear that's given to a lot of young people or entrepreneurs that you think they should ignore?
I wouldn't ignore any advice. But I maybe not jump on all of it, because even a bad bit of advice you can lock away and say, well, I recognise that as bad advice, so you make sure you don't get anywhere near it. But more specifically, don't allow anyone to restrict your thinking. If you've got a great idea, you've then got to back it up with the science. The science being the capital, the return, the cash flows, the projections, etc. But don't let anybody push you back on your big picture, your idea.
It's been a pleasure talking to you today. I could talk for another 2 hours. As I said, I've got about 3 hours worth of questions. But just to wrap up, have you got any parting comments or anything you'd like to say to people who are trying to get into, let's not just typecast it in the events business, but in business in general, or starting off in their career?
No, what I would say, I presume this is a regional Birmingham focused event. If it's not, it doesn't matter. If it is, it works.
The internet can go around the world.
Okay, I get that. But if your audience is Birmingham based, I'm going to say to you, don't look a gift horse in the mouth here. Birmingham is in a really good place. Otherwise, I'd be saying the world is a much smaller place. There's more capital available to support your projects and your businesses. It's a time for innovation. And probably I'd say be brave.
It's a good parting comment to have. Be brave. Paul, thank you very much for your time today.
Right.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Right, good.
Thank you. Cheers.
All right, okay.
Thank you for tuning into Event Stars. If you'd like to keep up to date with future podcasts or get further event tips, then catch me on Insta at events_Gurmej or on Twitter at GurmejSP, spelled GURMEJSP. Thank you again, and until next time.